Welcome back to the On The Rhoad Sports Talk Show. I'm your host, Landon Rhoads. We're bringing you episode 3 from the living room once again, and I have my good friend Joe Sabik coming on the show. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to be discussing some NBA storylines, and then a little bit of NFL to close things out. But we got a mostly NBA show here for you folks at home. So, Joe, to get things started, we have some serious trade rumors coming out of Houston over the last week or so. We all know the head coach, Mike D'Antoni, fired. Their GM is now on the 76ers as well. So some major overturn there in the front office. But the rumors on the word on the street here is that Harden and Westbrook both are unhappy. Harden may have ghosted the Rockets. They said he hasn't contacted them in 2 weeks. Someone said that, and then I think it was Kendrick Perkins said that. He's the only source to say that, so it's a little unconfirmed there, but multiple sources are saying that Russell Westbrook is unhappy and wants out. I was wondering your thoughts on that. I could see Westbrook leaving. I don't think Harden's going anywhere, but what's your take on this?
I think if James Harden goes anywhere, it's going to be to the Brooklyn Nets. I see a trade of Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, and Taurean Prince going back to Houston. And this would give Brooklyn a big three of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden, which would be the next big super team in the NBA. But it also allows the Houston Rockets to start rebuilding. So that's what I would, if James Harden goes anywhere, it's going to be Brooklyn.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think if anywhere, I could see Harden going to the Nets, but I personally think he's probably going to stay put. I just don't see them getting rid of him at this point, but obviously if they did, it would have to be for a large amount of compensation. Like you were saying, the Nets would be throwing in a lot in that offer. So I don't even know if you mentioned it or not, but I would assume there'd be some draft picks in there as well. But moving on to just Westbrook specifically, Hornets, Knicks, Clippers, those are the big three I've been hearing. I think the Hornets are the most likely of all of those, but I'm not sure. It really depends on, I think, who throws the most into the deal. What do you think about those three options for Westbrook?
Well, I think the most likely destination for him is New York. And I think he's going to be a Knick. And I think that the Knicks are going to give up at least a couple future first-round picks and possibly Kevin Knox. But imagine, the Knicks have not had a point guard. I can't remember when they last had a point guard, to be honest with you. So it's been a while. They need a star in New York, especially with the Nets going to be, they could easily make the Eastern Conference Finals to easily win the finals. They need something to combat that and be competitive in their market. So I think that you'll see Westbrook go to the Knicks.
Definitely. I don't think the Knicks can afford to let Westbrook get away in this deal. Like I said, I think the Hornets are the favorite, but I totally agree with the reasons you gave for the Knicks there, because if they're not careful, the Nets are going to become the new team of New York. Quite honestly, I'm not even a Nets fan, and I'm very excited to see what the Nets do this next season. So moving on then, out west, we have some Devin Booker speculation in Phoenix. I thought actually the performance of the Suns in the bubble was very encouraging for the chances of Booker staying there. I'm sure we all know, anyone that followed the NBA here late in the last season, undefeated in the bubble. The Suns, they did not lose a game in the bubble. They were meshing really well, and it looked like a lot of young talents really coming together in a great way over there in Phoenix. But then a report came out that the worst kept secret in basketball is that Booker wants out of Phoenix. There were some counter reports that said that's not true. He was very excited about the coming year. But you gotta take both into consideration a little here. Some of the teams that have interest in Devin Booker are the 76ers that would like to pair him with Joel Embiid. That would be a dynamic duo for sure. That would be That would be pretty crazy, but you almost assume the deal would have to involve Ben Simmons in some way if that was on the table. The Los Angeles Clippers, another option, but again, the rumor is that would involve Paul George. So some kind of superstar is going to have to be given up in return for Devin Booker. And a final team that might have interest in him would be the Timberwolves. And I find that one to be the most likely just because his two good friends, Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, they're already over there. And it's been said for a while that the three of them would like to play together at some point in their careers. I think most people assumed it'd be late in their careers, but hey, why not get started early? I could definitely see the Timberwolves. Who do you think's most likely, or does Booker stay in Phoenix, Joe?
So I agree with your call on Devin Booker going to Minnesota. I think that Minnesota is going to give up their number one pick in the draft this year, and they're going to allow Phoenix to either take LaMelo Ball or Anthony Edwards to replace Devin Booker. And then they're also going to be able to get Jarrett Culver, because I think Jarrett Culver is included in that trade. So now you have a starting lineup of Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball, Jarrett Culver, Mikal Bridges, I believe. Yeah, Michael Bridges. And then they have Kelly Oubre and DeAndre Ayton. That's still a good starting five. I mean, yes, you're losing probably the best player in that trade, but you're also getting a lot back in return.
Absolutely. It's like a depth move for the Suns for sure. And I could see that being beneficial to both teams as well. Obviously, when you first hear getting rid of Devin Booker, you assume they got to be getting ripped off. But the way you just broke that down, I could see it being a win-win, absolutely. So then moving on to another trade, Oklahoma City. This one seems like the most likely of all the ones we've discussed here. I would say Russell Westbrook and this one right here with Chris Paul are probably the two most likely, at least in the near future. As Billy Donovan, we all know he's out of OKC. He's in Chicago now. They have the new head coach out there, and apparently the general manager, Sam Presti, is really pushing to get Chris Paul a new home. And it's nothing bad against Chris Paul. It's just I think they respect Chris Paul as much as anyone, and they want to give him to a contender, not necessarily rebuilding team. Although obviously the Thunder were nice last year in the playoffs. They were 1 Game 7 win away from the Western Conference Finals. But that aside, once again, we're hearing this team a lot as the contenders for all these guys. 76ers, and I mean, the 76ers' new general manager is the Rockets' old general manager, Daryl Morey, and he's been known to make big moves, so that's part of the reason the Sixers keep coming up here. But the Suns, but apparently the Suns are hesitant to give up the 10th pick. That's what the Thunder want, at least as part of the trade. And the Clippers, Kawhi wants him once again. And here's an interesting little tidbit. Chris Paul does not want to play for the Lakers. That's been reported. I don't know if he views that as taking the easy way out, joining the defending champs, or what his exact reasoning is for that. But what do you think about chances Chris Paul goes to one of these teams?
So I actually have another team that I've just thought about, and it's because they're young and they can also get back. Well, let's look at Charlotte. I mean, we haven't talked about them yet. So imagine getting Devontae Graham for Chris Paul, that first-round pick, which is 3rd overall, and they would also get a couple future first-round picks. Now the Oklahoma City Thunder have a young backcourt of Devontae Graham at point guard and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, while also being able to offload the contract of Chris Paul. Now, coming back in that trade would also be Nicholas Batum, because there's no way to get rid of the Chris Paul contract completely. But Chris Paul has 3 years, whereas Nicholas Batum only has 2, so they would be able to get rid of that money sooner. And then Devontae Graham is only on an expiring deal, so he has a chance. So if they don't work out between Devontae Graham and Shai Gilgeous, then there's like little risk. So there's definitely a chance that I think they see that happening to Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little hesitant to say they're going to give up all that for Chris Paul just because he is getting older. I can't imagine he has too many more seasons left. Devontae Graham seems like a developing superstar. They might do that. I don't know if they would throw in those other picks too. It's anyone's guess. I wonder how much Charlotte would be willing to give up for an older superstar. And obviously Chris Paul can still get the job done. But looking at the Hornets, I don't know if they're going to be in serious contention probably for the rest of Chris Paul's career, I would almost say, depending on how much longer he plays. I don't want to say he's going to retire sooner than he is, but who knows? So moving on from the NBA trade rumors, we're going to be talking about the upcoming NBA draft this Wednesday. Just the top 5 picks. We're going to keep it pretty brief here, but I know you prepared your top 5. I prepared my top 5. Let's just break it down here pick by pick. You give your number 1, I'll give my number 1, and who knows, we might be in agreement here on some of these. I know we already touched on it a little bit with what we think the Timberwolves might do, but who's your number 1 pick going to the Timberwolves on Wednesday?
So I think LaMelo Ball is going to get drafted number 1 overall. He's going to get drafted by the Timberwolves, but he's going to end up in Phoenix, and just because of the Devin Booker trade.
That is actually basically exactly what I would say. I got my Ball jersey right here. It was his older brother Lonzo, but I got Ball going number 1 here to the Timberwolves. But I agree with you. Don't be surprised if there's some kind of trade involving Phoenix, because I do think they want Devin Booker out there. But even if they don't, I'd say LaMelo Ball, most talented player available overall. Just take him. That's that. And I would assume you would move, even if you keep him, you would move D'Angelo Russell to shooting guard or something along those lines. But so we agree on pick number 1. Who do you have at pick number 2?
So number 2 is going to be James Wiseman. Golden State needs a center. James Wiseman is probably the best center in the NBA in this draft. So you then have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins. You also have Draymond Green and James Wiseman. That's a pretty good front court of defensive players. So Draymond Green and James Wiseman. And then you have the scoring in the backcourt.
Absolutely. That's who I had too. James Wiseman, the center out of Memphis. Center is a big need for Golden State, and honestly it has been for a while. They've filled in the center spot, but it's obviously always been a weakness. They've had through the years, I can think Andrew Bogut, Ezeli was there. Who they start? Well, they tried Boogie Cousins there for a bit as well. Maurice Spates. It's just been a struggle through the years at that center position. I do wonder if it would throw off their style of play to have a dominant center, but I'm sure they're not worried about that. I think Wiseman's the obvious pick there. But moving on, we've agreed so far entirely to pick number 3 here, the Hornets. Who do you have the Hornets picking, or do you see a trade here? Because the Hornets have come up in a lot of our trade discussion as well.
So if the Hornets don't trade the pick, it's going to be Anthony Edwards. And I think there's a way to get Chris Paul, like you were saying. We're giving up a lot. We'd be giving up a lot for Chris Paul if we gave up the number 3 pick plus Devontae Graham. So if they can give up Devontae Graham plus the expired contract of Batum and the 2022 first, they can still get a point guard to develop under Chris Paul. So now you've got Anthony Edwards learning from one of the best point guards ever in Chris Paul.
Absolutely. That would be a great mentor for Anthony Edwards for sure. That's who I had at pick number 3 as well. And honestly, not all that surprising that we had the same top 3, because those are pretty widely considered the top 3 guys. I mean, the consensus is those are the top 3 guys, and there's not much debate that that's a fact. There is a little debate on which order those top 3 will go, but obviously you and I were in agreement on that. So now this is when it gets a little more interesting. Picks 4 and 5 here. We have the Chicago Bulls, new coach Billy Donovan at pick 4. What's your take on this pick here?
So the Bulls need a small forward. The best small forward, I mean, he's a developmental prospect, is Denny Avdija. If you can have Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Denny Avdija, Lowry Markin, and Wendell Carter Jr., that is a young team that can easily make the playoffs. Maybe not next year, but in the years to come.
Down the road, yeah, definitely. I mean, when you take developmental guys like that, you're kind of playing the long game there. I actually had Obi Toppin here, but either one could work. I mean, it's small forward versus power forward. You could switch that up for all day, honestly. We could go back and forth with these two guys, but I had Toppin just because I think I like his story about kind of coming from an under-recruited guy to player of the year at Dayton. And I just think he'll help Billy Donovan build the culture he needs in Chicago as a new coach. But I also agree that small forward is a need as well. So I don't disagree with your pick as well. But moving on to our final pick of this mock draft, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, number 5, the hometown Cavs. Who do you have the Cavs taking? It seems like it's time to move on from Kevin Love. I would expect some kind of Kevin Love trade this coming year. So I don't know. That played into my pick a little. I don't know if it played into yours, but who do you have?
So I see the Cavs taking a forward. The question is, are they going to stay at 5? Right now, if they stay at 5, it's Obi Toppin for me. If they trade down, it's going to be Emeka Okongwu. And I just think he's a great defensive player already, and he has the upside to develop into a really good offensive player. So now you have either Obi Toppin or Emeka Okongwu. You have Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, and Kevin Porter Jr. You have a pretty young team, but a team that can develop together.
Absolutely. I think that's what you're going to have to obviously take a position of need, and I think we can all agree after seeing past few Cavs drafts that I don't think point guard or shooting guard is much of a need anymore. We're pretty loaded up there. It's more in the forward area that I think we're going to see a pick. And the Cavaliers can be a bit of a wild card sometimes with their drafts. Don't forget Anthony Bennett. That was out of nowhere. Stuff like that. So, but I actually had it flipped. See, you had Toppin possibly here. I had Denny right here. Denny Avdija from Israel, the small forward. He's the best international prospect, and you could maybe slide him to the 4 if you wanted to. He's actually, I believe he's a little taller than Toppin, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I looked that up. But so you have some options for the Cavs. I don't think you can go wrong if you're the Cavs as long as you don't load up on point guard or shooting guard again. And I can't imagine that the management would do that, but who knows? But definitely looking forward to that draft on Wednesday. Should be very interesting.
Moving on. And a lot of trades.
Oh, what was that? Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying it should be busy and we should have a lot of trades in it. So it should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Should be a lot of fun. I'm expecting a lot of trades, like we said, possibly 2 in that top 3. That's pretty crazy. But that's a little more into the future. Looking ahead to today, we're filming here on Sunday. We have an NFL slate here for you, and I was just wondering what your top 3 games to watch are today. My picks were changed a little bit by the fact that Thursday night already happened, because honestly, I might have put Colts Titans as one of my top 3, but it already happened. So Thursday night out of the way. Let's just look forward to Sunday and Monday. What are your top 3 games, Joe?
So my first game is going to be the Miami Dolphins versus the Los Angeles Chargers. You have Tua Tagovailoa versus Justin Herbert. Each quarterback went right after each other. You have the Miami Dolphins, who are in the first time in a while in contention for winning the AFC East. And the Chargers could easily be 5-3 or 6-2. They've lost 3 games where they've had 17-point leads late in the game. And they've also lost last week where they had a touchdown overturned. I mean, both teams could easily be in contention in the AFC for a playoff spot.
Yeah, Joe, I totally agree with you on this. So far, not much disagreement between you and I on anything, NBA or NFL. But I have the same exact first game, Chargers, Dolphins, battle of the young guns, Tua versus Herbert. And Tua's had a little more success so far than Herbert, 2-0 as the starter. But Herbert's 1-7, which sounds really bad when you just say it like that. But as you were saying, extremely close losses. Less than a touchdown, or a touchdown or less, excuse me. A touchdown or less every single game up to this point. And here's a really interesting stat when I was looking at it. Of all the games they've lost, when you add up how much total points they've been outscored by, 27. When you keep in mind that we're talking about 7 games here, that is insane. 27-point difference when you combine 7 losses. That is insane. And the Chargers very easily could be in a lot better position right now, but they aren't. But this is a chance for Herbert to take his frustrations out on the Dolphins, I suppose. All right, so moving on to game 2. What's your second game to look for this Sunday?
So the Cardinals versus the Bills. You got Josh Allen versus Kyle Murray. And you also got 2 of the best young wide receivers and pretty much in the prime wide receivers in DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs. Both are, I think, top 5 for wide receiver yards per game. And they're both really good. So it's going to be a high-scoring game. And both teams are in contention for making the playoffs and even winning their own division. So I just think that's going to be a great game.
Yeah, definitely. That was not one I selected, but it was one I thought about for sure. That should be a great game. And last episode, I covered the Bills beating the Seahawks, something that actually surprised me, quite honestly. I thought it'd be a close game, but I expected the Seahawks to come out on top in the end. And the Bills proved me wrong. The Bills looked really good, and it'll be interesting to see if they can keep it going against the Cardinals. But my second game is actually Eagles versus Giants. I know it sounds bad. It sounds really bad. And record-wise, it is. But in terms of one of these teams going to the playoffs, which is going to happen, someone from that division, not necessarily these two, but the way it's looking right now, I think it will be the Eagles or the Giants. And I think this game will offer a little NFC East clarity here, and it could be a signature win for Daniel Jones, a player that's honestly impressed me. Last episode, I was talking about the Tampa Bay game. Yes, the Giants lost, but they held their own there against a good Tampa Bay team. And then we saw last week the Giants look good again. I think the Giants, despite their record, are starting to find a little something within their team. And all that being said, the Eagles could still come out there and beat them, and then the Eagles are still in the driver's seat. But I think this game will decide who's in the driver's seat for the NFC East. So not that exciting of a game maybe when you just look at their records and stuff, but I think there are some serious playoff implications here with these two teams. So moving on now, who's your third and final matchup to look out for on Sunday?
Give me Seahawks versus Rams. The Rams are only a game behind the Seahawks, and they've quietly done it behind a really good defense, and Aaron Donald being probably the defensive player of the year so far. And you've got Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. So it's going to be interesting to see, because DK Metcalf is probably going to be covered by Jalen Ramsey the whole game. Who's going to come out on top at that matchup, and who comes out? And if Jalen Ramsey comes out on top, it's easy to see the Rams being in first place after the end of today.
Definitely, yeah. Those divisional matchups, they can get really interesting. And it's also worth noting that if Metcalf does get locked up, we could see a big Tyler Lockett game. It's a possibility. I don't know who's going to cover Lockett, but I would definitely look out for that Metcalf-Ramsey matchup without a doubt. So my third and final game to look out for is Ravens-Patriots. The Patriots, they barely survived the Jets last week, which was a shocker to me. I thought they'd at least cover the spread there, which was 10. I thought they would at least win by 10, but didn't happen. It was a last-second field goal for the win. So Patriots on life support a little bit right now. But Newton could buy himself some time with a win over the Ravens, because if I'm Cam Newton, I am starting to get a little bit concerned about my job security. And my friend Dylan, who was on the show last week, made sure to point out it's not like the Patriots have a great backup to take over for Newton either. But at this point, I feel like the Patriots are going to be ready to try just about anybody, depending on how Cam performs. And then on the Baltimore side of things, we all know the Ravens are in a very, very tough division there in the AFC North. Everyone's in contention there, aside from Cincinnati, who have looked better than they did last year. I think Burrow's helped improve that team. But the Ravens, they have a great record right now. They've only lost 2 games, and despite that, they're still pretty far back from first because the Steelers haven't lost a game. So they got to keep pace with the Steelers, and on the flip side of that, I believe the Browns are the Browns are on their tail on the other end. So they're kind of in a sandwich right now with the Browns and then the Steelers on top. So this is a must-win game, I think, for the Ravens just to keep pace in the AFC North. I mean, they lose this game and there are going to be some questions creeping in. Could they miss the playoffs? I know it sounds ridiculous, but if the Browns really kill it down the stretch and the Steelers keep doing what they're doing, any of these teams, quite honestly, could miss the playoffs if they trip up and start losing a few games in a row. I mean, it's a really, really, really tough division. So that's my final game, but I think all of the games we mentioned are going to be awesome this Sunday. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But that's all I have. So that's all I have for this show. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And we're going to bring you episode 4 here before Thanksgiving break as well. Maybe looking forward to the Thanksgiving football games. Going to be interesting, always a lot of fun. And as well as maybe breaking down the NBA trade, seeing if anything that we predicted came to fruition here after we talked about it. So I'm Landon Rhoads. This is the On The Rhoad Sports Talk Show, and have a good night.